Alrighty guys, I figured since my last video, I think it was time to actually get started on the battle analysis videos. Today's two contestants are Godzilla, whoops, my bad. Today's two contestants are the male Muto from Godzilla 2014. Here are his heights, stats, and all the stuff you'll need to know. And we'll be going over Zilla Jr. from Godzilla the Animated Series. Here are his stats. Today we'll be going over a little bit more of who would win in a fight, and we'll be focusing a little bit more on them both at their prime and full power. The four categories we'll be going over are strength, hacks and abilities, intelligence, and combat skills. Now keep in mind, I may get some things wrong, and I wish you guys to not take this to heart. So today we'll be going over these four categories. I'll be going into a little bit of depth on who wins. Please, if you guys enjoy these types of contents, please let me know, because I want to keep doing these more for you guys, so you guys can get a bit more of my goofy side. Let's get started. So the first thing is strength. Now looking at strength, you can easily think of a few, like Zilla Jr. or the male Muto. Looking at Zilla Jr.'s weight, it is stated that he weighs at around 60,000 metric tons, which is actually quite heavy. The two most heaviest opponents that he was able to lift was the El Gusano Gigante and his cybernetically enhanced parent Cyberzilla, which their weight class is around his own. So, going by logic here, he was able to lift both of his own weight class, 60,000 metric tons, which that's quite heavy. If we were to look at the weight closely, my only assumption is that the weight is around small building, maybe even medium to large building. But that is about as much as from what I can see is lift. Striking strength can be a little tougher to determine, but going by from what I can see and remember, it looks like that he was able to put out maybe at most 100,000 metric tons of force in the, I believe it was called the Monster Wars, where he was able to send his parent flying and even cause them to fail the landing. Which means, if we're looking at it, he was able to do that easily enough, so he was probably able to put out at around 100,000 metric tons of force, maybe less, if he were to do it this easily. But now we're looking at the male Muto. Now the male Muto striking strength is a little harder to determine. There's no on-screen feats from what I can see, but we can definitely name a few two scenes. The first scene being the scene where the humans attempted to lure it with a nuke, where it had dove down and it grabbed a nuke, and it was only really able to cause dents and small destruction to the ship, but most likely due to the water resistance. And we were knowing that he was attempting to not destroy the nuke, but keep it in good condition to send back to the female. And another scene is where he is flying through the city, and we can see him landing on a building, and he was able to cause a small bit of the building to crumble, or I guess I shouldn't say small, quite a bit of it, maybe 5 to 10% of the building. But he was able to cause some damage just by landing. Which means we can probably assume that he's able to put at around... Now, I can't really determine how much this weight of the building is, or how much these weights of these concrete are able to assume. But going by a couple of logics, and of course, I'm just guessing here, most buildings' pounds of pressure that they're able to withstand is possibly around between 10 to maybe 15,000 pounds. And the fact that the male Muto was able to easily destroy it just by landing makes me assume that he was able to put out maybe at most double that, maybe even triple. Meaning he was able to put out at around between 30 to maybe 70 pounds of force. Well, in this current terms, metric tons. But lifting strength is actually a little more easier to determine with one scene in mind. During the final battle between the Mutos and Godzilla, the male Muto came in flying and was actually able to pull a 300,000 ton Godzilla. Please, if I get the weight wrong on Godzilla, I apologize. And he was able to do that while flying, which is impressive all on its own. The fact that he was able to pull them while flying is definitely more than enough praise and feats. So, when giving the strength point, we can definitely look at it between these two. From what I can only guess, we could probably give them both the points here, as they both are strong in their own ways. While Zilla Jr.'s max lifting capacity may be capped at 60,000, maybe more if we were to get more opponents, way more than the two we mentioned, and the male Muto being able to lift 300,000 tons, we can safely assume both get the points, but Zilla Jr. gets it in terms of striking, and the male Muto gets it in terms of lifting. Now, we're going to go ahead and look at The next category being the hacks and abilities, specifically hacks, H-A-X, not H-A-C-K. When looking at this category, you may be thinking, what do these mean? You may know what abilities mean, but what about hacks? Hacks is a term for basically where their durability is some not beyond on this right. Now, thankfully, these both creatures can be defeated with normal weaponry, as we saw in the first episode of Godzilla the Animated Series, where Godzilla had to run off due to the fact that the missiles were able to harm him, possibly due to the fact that his skills weren't hardened at the time. But we'll be looking at them mostly throughout the series, and of course throughout the movie. We're going to go ahead and start off with a little more easier and harder to determine, being the male Muto. So from what I can guess and can see, the male Muto was able to handle being swung around through buildings and being able to get back up and flying again with barely any issues. And it took him being smashed into a building and getting impaled through the head to really be taken down. So we can probably put his durability up to a large city to maybe large continental level of durability. Endurance, because he was able to handle getting swing around through buildings with barely any scratch and was able to get back up flying, endurance-wise could definitely be higher. Possibly large continental to maybe planetary or moon level. Like I said, I may not be good at these, but of course, I'm going based on knowledge, so I'm not really 100% certain if any of these are right. And ability-wise, will be easier to determine. When looking at abilities, the male Muto really has two sets of abilities that really matter. The ability to fly and the EMP ability. And of course, that's about it as far as abilities. The ability to fly can definitely give him a good aerial combat advantage, and the EMP can weaken Godzilla, as it weakens electromagnetic pulse, and it could probably weaken the electricity pulsing through Godzilla's body. So, we can only say he really has two sets of abilities. While the other ability is more related to his intelligence, which we'll be getting to here in a second, it's definitely more the fact that he technically has three abilities, and of course the two most important being flying and the EMP. Now, when looking at Zilla Jr., as I stated earlier, his hacks was, of course, at the first part of the series, was a little tougher to determine, as he was able to get hurt by basic tank and rocket missiles. But later in the series, he becomes a lot more immune to them, and was actually able to survive hits from missiles with barely any scratches. But one of the feats that I've been told many times when making debate edits with these two was that Zilla Jr. was able to survive a volcanic eruption with barely any scratches, which means he was able to handle the splashes of lava with no damages at all. Which is impressive on its own that he was able to survive a volcanic eruption. I feel like the male Muto would most likely come out with a few burns, but not 100% certain. So the fact that he was able to survive a volcanic eruption, and we can see later in the series he was able to take a full-on laser beam blast with no damages, really only getting knocked out, it's definitely an impressive feat. So we could definitely put his durability level, if we're going by what I can tell, I could probably safely put his durability up between small continental to large continental level. In terms of durability, endurance-wise, he's able to endure a lot of pain. As I stated, he took a full-on alien laser beam with barely any damage and only really got knocked out. And it is stated that he does have regeneration factors, but from what I can only guess, just like the Monsterverse, he can only regenerate if he were to rest. But my other assumption is that he could also regenerate if he were to consume a certain amount of food to get his body started. So the fact that he was able to survive a volcanic eruption with no scratches and have a healing factor that could definitely be useful means that he's able to handle all sorts of damage. So putting his endurance level is definitely at most large continental, nothing any bigger than that. So determining on who gets this point, it's definitely Zilla Jr. Now, because before we continue, I guess I should say why. The main reason Zilla Jr. will get this category win is because of the fact that with the Atomic Breath ability and with the ability to have that Atomic Breath and of course Regeneration Factor could definitely give him a slight edge, as I don't think it's stated that the male Muto has a Regeneration Factor. So it would be a little hard to determine if he could survive hits or not. Especially, with the fact that Zilla Jr.'s Atomic Breath could easily burn through steel and concrete, causing them to melt. So now let's get into intelligence. Starting off with a little harder to determine one, the male Muto. The male Muto's intelligence is a little hard to determine, because it does have the basic animal intelligence with communication. as it was able to communicate with the female Muto, which means he probably has basic animal intelligence, being able to communicate with its own kind. But one thing that it could definitely correlate to this being higher is because of the fact that it was knowing the humans would bring food for it and attack from above. It was knowing that the humans were trying to lure not only it and the female Muto, but also Godzilla far from the city with a nuke, knowing what they eat. So it decided to take the different approach and attack from above, diving into the lake and grabbing the nuke, taking it back to the female Muto. Which means not only does it have a pretty good basic animal IQ and intelligence, it also has a pretty good high battle intelligence due to the fact that it knew the humans were leading it into a trap. So we can definitely put the intelligence level possibly just below dolphin level, maybe even more down, possibly just above animal level. But looking at Zilla Jr., it is definitely no doubt on he is heck of a lot more smarter. Starting off, he's able to understand the human language pretty well, in fact, knowing phrases like go, or understanding stay, or understanding that a person is no threat. So he's able to understand the human intelligence level, so we could definitely say he's probably smarter than animal for sure. But there are still times where he will act out on animalistic instinct. One of the scenes that I can recall is when he gets captured by the vines, and is instead used as a flamethrower to try and burn his friends. He attempts to actually, burn the vines off, from what I can see. So the fact that the male Muto may be slightly smarter, Zilla Jr. is still slightly smarter with the fact that they're both relying on animalistic instinct, but Zilla Jr. takes the cake on this intelligence because of a few more factors. Because they're able to understand human language, he's able to take most likely at most in terms human levels of intelligence, so possibly just above or even just below dolphin. But he probably gets it higher because of one more, the battle side. He's actually strategically capable. A few scenes that can come to mind is going up against the creature from episode 2 of season 1, the Cretaceous Rex. I believe that's what this thing is called. He was able to use rocks to lure it over to him to a ridge that was completely unstable, and starts tunneling underneath it to cause it to become even more unstable to drop under its own weight. Making it to where his strategic capabilities is definitely not hard to understand. He knew that the ridge was unstable, and he used it to his own advantage. And a few more sides, from one more that I can tell, is when he's up against his own cybernetic enhanced father, Zilla, where instead of going up head on, in terms of just striking with his strength, he decided to take a more intelligence route by actually dodging attacks and using his own weight against them. Such as soon as he goes for a swing, he dodges and uses his own momentum against them. So when it comes to intelligence, it's definitely Zilla Jr. As with those factors involved, it's definitely not going to be a question. Now we're into the final section of the video, the final part of this debate, if you will. We'll be looking at combat and skills. Starting off with the male Muto, it's a little hard to determine its combat and skill sets. We'll go a little bit more over skill sets first. Its skill set includes the ability to fly and doing dive bomb attacks when opponents least expect it, and of course using an EMP attack on high-tech gear. But at most, it's able to have basic combat of animals, meaning it attacks more out of aggression really than anything. And combat-wise, it really just knows how to swipe its claws and bite, and doing dive bombs, which could really just not give it a good combatic edge. But a pretty good one nonetheless. Zilla Jr. on the other hand, from what I've been seen and of course heard, he was trained by the heat-seeking team, who was able to train him on some good combat tactics, including, like I stated earlier, on how he was able to use his own father's momentum to toss him in the water. He was able to take on the military by running away and using the environments to his own advantage to ambush, making it a pretty good tactical creature if you ask me. He was able to take on aliens with higher intelligence with just the things he's learned, as he's been able to use his hands, tails, and teeth pretty more efficiently than the male Muto could ever use its mouth, or what would you call his feet? Possible claws? Spears, if you want? We're gonna just And that would make a little bit more sense for Zilla Jr. to take the point on this one because of the fact that he's able to use his appendages a little bit more efficiently. Especially his atomic breath, he would use a little bit more efficiently as well. And the skill sets is endless, being able to tunnel underground like it was nothing to ambush or even get away is impressive enough as is. Using his high levels of intelligence to ambush, think strategically, it's no doubt on who the winner of this point category is. That being Zilla Jr. himself. So now that we've gone through all 4 of the categories, who wins? Zilla Jr. or the male Muto? Well, from a standpoint, you'd probably be thinking it's all based on brute strength. So you would probably think the male Muto due to the fact that he was able to lift a 300,000 ton Godzilla while flying, or not lift per se, but pull. But even with those abilities to being able to pull a 300,000 ton lizard while flying, compared to a lizard with intelligence, it's definitely a no-brainer on who truly wins this battle. Zilla Jr. takes the victory on this one. But we need to look at it from a couple standpoints. This is if it's all on ground or sea. If it was aerial combat, it would definitely be a slight struggle for Zilla Jr., as he won't be able to really keep up in the air, seeing as he's really more of a ground and sea creature. But I would definitely confidently say that Zilla Jr. takes the win. With that atomic breath being able to melt through concrete, we could definitely say it could definitely do some pretty good damage to the male Muto, seeing as it's the smallest of the Muto's species. So, now that we got the victor, what's the difficulty? As I stated earlier, due to that aerial ability, I think it's safe to say we'll put it between a mid-high difficulty level. Mainly just due to that flying capabilities. It's not easy to determine. With the atomic breath being able to melt through concrete and steel, it will definitely be a tough fight if he can manage to hit the attacks appropriately. And remember, this is just Zilla Jr. when he was most likely a year old at this point. If the series were to have continued, we could have potentially seen him at a much higher capabilities. So, the winner of this debate video will be Zilla Jr. with a mid-high difficulty, no questions asked. Now that we went over this a little bit deeper, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, I promise that next week's video will be a very much popular debate that has been going around since 2019. And that debate will be between thermonuclear Godzilla versus burning Godzilla. I'll catch you guys next week, and if you guys, of course, enjoy these videos, hit that like and sub for more. In the meantime, there is your victor, and I'll see you guys next week with a brand new debate. Goodbye.